Hey everyone. Welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host Ruby, and we're gonna get into reading more of the Book of the Bizarre, Freaky Facts and Strange Stories. And also for my other videos for the gameplay, I hope that you guys are enjoying that and, comment below. Are there any other games that you would like me to check out, to play, give a gameplay for? And I know you probably hear it from the sound of my voice, but I do have a bit of a stuffy nose, but that's not gonna stop me from reading. And just want to ask if everybody that hasn't already, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. And definitely, if you can, share the video with friends, family. And now then, sit back, relax, grab a drink and some snacks, and let's get into it, shall we? Star Life. On April 21st, 1997, a rocket containing the cremated remains of 24 people were launched into space. Among the remains were those of Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek series creator. The rocket was launched by Celestis, a company that formed in 1996 for the purpose of launching ashes into space. A tisket, a tasket. The word coffin and casket are commonly substituted for one another, but they do technically mean different things. A coffin is defined as a box or chest for burying a corpse and is generally wedged shape and simple. A casket is almost always rectangular and fancier than a coffin. In the 15th century, a casket was used to store jewels. Excuse me. Good night and good luck. Ready to move on after a painful divorce? Then you should probably purchase a wedding ring coffin. Described on the creator's website as the perfect gift for yourself or a loved one for bringing closure after a divorce. The coffin allows you to bury the past and move on to a new tomorrow. Prices start around $30 for beautiful miniature mahogany coffins inscribed with sayings such as "gone and forgotten" or "6 feet isn't deep enough" and "I do not." Visit the company's website at www.weddingringcoffin.com. Cemetery Iconography. In this book, Stories in Stones, a field guide to cemetery symbolism and iconography, author and photographer Douglas Keister has compiled a reference guide for cemetery goers that is equivalent to an Audubon field guide for ornithologists, covering everything from Freemasonry symbols to the meanings of flowers. Stories in Stones is a must for any graveyard groupie. Keister teaches the reader that morning glories symbolize the resurrection, and a draped urn may signify the veil between the earth and heavens, and a feather can represent ascent into heaven. Some other common cemetery symbolisms are: an anchor is both a symbol of hope and the mark of a seafarer. Flowers represent love, beauty, and a brief life. Chrysanthemums are symbolic of longevity and immortality. Calla lilies mean beauty and marriage. Daisies often mark children's graves, and violets mean humility. A weeping willow expresses the sorrow of the deceased's surviving friends and family. A shaft of wheat generally means a long and abundant life. An acorn represents prosperity. I did not know any of that. That's honestly something to think about. Wow. Deathly traditions. Día de los Muertos, or Noche de Muertos. In Mexico, candles, one for each deceased relative, are lit by families on the night following November 1st, Día de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. November 1st is the day to honor dead children and wayward spirits, and November 2nd is the day to honor deceased family members and friends. Families begin preparations sometimes weeks in advance. Arriving at the cemetery, they clean the graves and lay fresh soil to create the mounds of earth on which flowers and flower petals and candles can be arranged in artful designs. Offerings are placed on the graves, including pan de muerto, bread for the dead, flowers, sugar skulls, or sugar animals, and favorite items of the deceased. Each region has its own specific variations on the holiday. Some have lively processions with dancing, and people paint their faces to look like skeletons. Other areas, celebrations are more somber and include traditional songs and candlelit processions beginning at 12:01 a.m. on November 2nd. Qing Ming, or Grave Sweeping Day. Observed on April 5th, this tradition is a day to honor the dead. It's celebrated by Chinese population throughout the world. This annual celebration begins by weeding grave sites and cleaning headstones. Fresh flowers are brought to the graves, and incense and paper money are burned there. Some families bring also paper clothing or other items to burn as offerings. Feasts are laid out on each of the graves as offerings to the ancestral spirits. 3 sets of chopsticks and 3 Chinese wine cups are laid out next to each headstone. The head of the household bows 3 times with each wine cup, pouring its contents into the grave. Some families eat the feast on the graves as a kind of picnic, and others set off firecrackers to scare off evil spirits and let the dead know the living are there. Especially in China, people carry willow branches with them and hang the branches on the front door of their house to ward off any wayward or evil spirits that wander during the Qingming celebration. Near-death experiences. Near-death experiences was a term first coined by Raymond Moody, an American psychologist. in the 1970s. According to Moody, the following are characteristic phases of a near-death experience, or an NDE. First, people floating out of their bodies, leaving pain or injury behind. They were able to see things they could not have seen from the vantage point of their body. Many also report being joined by guardian spirits and meeting dead relatives and friends. The next phase was a transitory one. People often compared it to floating along a passageway, such as a tunnel or bridge. The NDE, or near-death experience, climaxed with a sensation of unconditional love, or the feeling of coming home. And the last one, a life review, completed the experience. Haunting ladies. In the 16th century, Lady Glamis, convicted of witchcraft and trying to murder the King of Scotland, was burned at the stake. Her ghost now haunts Glamis Castle in Angus, Scotland. Many visitors have seen her floating above the clock tower. Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Jane Seymour are all said to haunt Hampton Court Palace, just outside of London. Morbid student bodies. The students of the University of Colorado at Boulder are known for their morbid fascination with the local story of Alfred Packer and his cannibal monstrosities of the 1870s. 50 years after Packer's conviction, the university students voted to rename the school cafeteria as the Alfred Packer Memorial Grill. It serves the usual standards, although some have unusual names. One of the most popular dishes is the El Cannibal burrito. The Burton Agnes skull. In 1598, the Griffin family decided to build a new home on their lands in Yorkshire. The three Griffin daughters were quite interested in the project. Anne, in particular. Anne paid great attention to the construction of the Burton Agnes Hall from start to finish, and she was quite attached to the old house at the end. One night, Anne was walking home on a road and was suddenly attacked by a gang of thieves. They struck her on the head, and if she had not been rescued by the villagers who had heard her screams, she most likely would have died immediately. She was quickly brought home to her family, but things did not look good. Before dying, Anne begged her sisters to keep a part of her in the Burton Agnes Hall forever. She decided upon her final goodbye that they should bury her skull within the walls of the house that she helped to build. Anne died 5 days after she had been attacked, and her sisters ignored her requests. Instead, they buried her in one piece in the church graveyard. Soon after the burial, the Griffin family heard blood-curdling screams ringing out in Burton Agnes Hall, and no one could discover their source. Chilled to the bone, the sisters feared that the screams were a call from Anne to fulfill her dying wish. With no other solution in mind, the Griffin family decided that they must obey Anne's wishes and dig her up immediately. When the coffin was opened, they received another terrible shock. The body had not decayed, but the head had fallen off and lost every bit of hair and tissue, leaving only a bare skull. The Griffins took Anne's skull home, and the screams subsided. Everything was fine for many years after that, until the house was sold to another family, who banished the skull from the Burton Agnes Hall. The screams promptly returned, and the horrified new inhabitants returned the skull to its place. The screams stopped yet again. Later, a new owner moved in, hid the skull away within a wall, and never told anyone where it is. No one has ever found the skull since, and yet the screams have not returned. Some people claim to have seen Anne floating around the house in October, the month in which she was killed, perhaps searching for her own skull. They can recognize the ghost as Anne because it matches her portrait, which still hangs in the house to this very day. And that, my dear friends, is where I'm going to leave it. I know that it's a short video. I do apologize, but I'm not, I'm not really doing too good. But again, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And until then, my friends, this is Ruby signing off.